Have you ever been so invisible that people spoke over you in a language you understood better than they did? So quiet, they mistook your silence for ignorance. But what if one day inside a glass tower of money, titles, and fake diplomacy a Saudi tycoon spoke in classical Arabic, and the only person who understood was the Black Janitor wiping fingerprints off the glass? Her name was Abeni DuPont, Brooklyn-born, 31, 2 jobs, one brilliant mind hidden behind a cleaning cart and a uniform that made her invisible. She didn't speak often, but when she did, she didn't just speak words, she translated power. That day, in a boardroom built on ego and misunderstanding, she said one sentence, not loud, not angry, just undeniable. And the room broke. If you've ever been overlooked for how you look, if you've ever watched lesser people climb higher ladders, this story is yours. So don't just listen, be part of it. Like, share, and subscribe to Racist Exposed, where we tell the stories they hope you never notice. Now, lean in, because what happened next didn't begin in the boardroom. It started in a hallway, with a spill, a sigh, and a woman who had stopped expecting to be heard. The smell of lemon disinfectant clung to her skin like second nature. At 2:14 a.m., the 43rd floor of Altiris Global was silent, except for the soft squeak of rubber soles and the faint ripple of water in a mop bucket. Abeni DuPont moved like a shadow, precise, practiced, invisible. The restroom outside the executive boardroom gleamed under fluorescent light. She had already cleaned it once at midnight, but a coffee spill near the sink had summoned her back. Some associate VP, probably. They never aimed for the trash can, just the general area. Someone like her would clean it up. Someone like her always did. Abeni reached for a fresh towel, her movements efficient. In another life, she might have paused to admire the marble counters or the gold-plated faucet handles imported from Italy, but she'd cleaned too many of them to be impressed anymore. She wiped, rinsed, polished, repeat. Quiet work for someone fluent in 5 languages. No one at Altiris Global knew that. None of them asked. They thought she was a night janitor who maybe spoke English as a second language. No one imagined she held a master's degree in comparative linguistics from the University of Edinburgh. No one wondered how a black woman in Brooklyn came to read Arabic poetry with the fluency of a native scholar, and she never offered to explain. Because Abeni DuPont had learned one thing very early in life: people don't listen unless they think you matter. So she had stopped trying to matter, at least not in their language. She'd traded academic conferences for cleaning supply closets, campus libraries for silent elevators, late-night research papers for night shifts. It wasn't that she gave up, she just reprioritized. After her mother's funeral and Isaiah's accident, the future she once designed in a Glasgow cafe over scribbled notes and red tea had narrowed into something smaller, something immediate. Rent, bills, caregiving, surviving. Still, her mind refused to shrink. Each night, tucked into the top drawer of her cleaning cart, hidden under gloves and disinfectant, was a worn, leather-bound book of Arabic poetry. Mahmoud Darwish, Nizar Kabani, the ones who wrote about exile, identity, and longing, words she whispered to herself when the building was empty and the city hummed like a sleeping beast. Abeni was not loud. She didn't need to be. She listened. She watched. She remembered everything. And as she emptied the trash in the corridor that led to the CEO's private suite, she paused for a breath. The silence there was different, heavier, like the air in a courtroom before a verdict. She looked down at her reflection in the polished tile floor. 31, Black, Janitor. But also linguist, daughter, watcher. The world saw only one of those things, and that was fine for now. She picked up the mop handle, smoothed her name badge, and walked down the hall without a sound. It was easier to move unnoticed when they thought you had nothing to say. But Abeni had words. She just hadn't decided when to say them yet. Abeni had just stepped out of the executive restroom when she heard voices down the corridor. Not casual chatter, not janitorial updates or late-night tech calls. These voices were sharp, low, strategic. She slowed her steps. Her cart rolled beside her in rhythm, the wheels squeaking softly on the marble floor like a violin in the distance. The conference room door had been left slightly ajar. Just enough. Inside, she saw silhouettes, 4 people in tailored suits, gathered around a glowing screen. "He lands at JFK tomorrow morning," a man's voice said, clipped and anxious. "His team will be at the tower by noon. That gives us less than 18 hours. Another voice chimed in, female, brisk. "The presentation's almost done, but if we fumble the cultural protocols, it won't matter. He's not just rich, he's legacy money, old royal bloodline stuff." Then came a third voice, louder, sharper, laced with that particular brand of confidence reserved for people who've never had to earn their proximity to power. "That's what the app is for," she said, tapping her phone. "I downloaded 3 different translators. We'll speak in English. Let him respond in Arabic. Smile like we understand. They love that being respected in their own language. All smoke and mirrors." Abeni recognized the voice instantly. Celeste Granger, Director of Global Strategy, blonde, polished, and known among the night staff as Miss White Wine at 4 p.m. Celeste laughed a brittle, calculated sound. "They eat that up. It's a pride thing. Arab men love formality. Just nod at the right time. Toss in a shukran and you're golden." A chuckle passed around the room. Someone else added, "He's probably expecting falafel and platitudes." Abeni felt her stomach tighten. Not from offense, she was used to that kind of tone, but from the weight of something deeper ignorance masquerading as strategy. They were preparing for Sheikh Rahim al-Qadir. Even the name carried history. Abeni remembered it from university lectures. His family had funded research grants, appeared in case studies, made the cover of diplomatic journals. He wasn't just legacy money. He was the kind of man who walked into rooms and rewrote expectations and contracts without raising his voice. And these people were going to meet him with Google Translate and blind confidence. Abeni didn't move. She stood just outside the door, mop handle resting against her shoulder. They hadn't noticed her. They never did. Inside, Celeste continued, "Just make sure the room smells expensive. That oud stuff. I ordered diffusers. He'll love it." "Should we rehearse a greeting in Arabic?" someone asked. Celeste snorted. "Please, the apps butcher it. We'll say welcome in English and let the rest be ambiance." The meeting moved on, slides clicking, jargon flying. Abeni turned away, pushing her cart slowly down the hallway. She said nothing, but inside her chest, something shifted. Not anger, not yet. Just an old, familiar question rising like steam from warm tile. How long do you let people pretend before you let them hear the truth? The subway was mostly empty at 3:10 a.m. Abeni sat near the window, the city blurring into soft neon streaks as the train rocked gently through Brooklyn. She rested her chin in her hand, eyes heavy, mind still orbiting the conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. Celeste's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "Just nod. Toss in a shukran. They eat that up." Abeni closed her eyes, but her fingers curled tighter around the strap of her bag. It wasn't rage. It was something slower, quieter, like disappointment wrapped in exhaustion. By the time she reached her apartment, the sky was beginning to pale with the first trace of morning. She climbed the stairs, careful not to wake the neighbors. The hallway smelled like instant noodles and laundry detergent. Inside, The one-bedroom space was dim and still. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with mismatched volumes, some thrifted, some from her university years. A beige couch sat under the window, covered in a soft blue blanket. Someone was under it. She shut the door quietly. "You're late," a voice mumbled from under the blanket. "I always am," Abeni replied, setting her bag down. Isaiah sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. His hair stuck out in all directions, a tangle of coiled frustration and sleep. He was 22, skinny, bright, carrying the kind of tired that lived behind the eyes, not under them. He stretched his arms, then looked at her more clearly. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired," she said. Isaiah hesitated, then, as if rehearsed, asked in a low voice, "Didn't you once say you were going to change the world?" Abeni froze. He didn't ask it with judgment. He asked it like someone tracing the edge of an old map, remembering a place, not accusing its distance. She didn't answer right away. She walked into the kitchenette, poured water into the kettle, and set it on the stove. The burner clicked. Flame flared blue. Behind her, Isaiah spoke again. "I mean, I get it. Life happens. But you were supposed to be in Cairo or Geneva, writing papers, wearing scarves, quoting Rumi." Abeni let out a soft sound, not quite a laugh. "I still wear scarves," she said. Her back turned. "I'm serious," he replied. "You used to talk like the world could actually shift if people just listened better." She opened a cabinet, pulled down 2 chipped mugs. Isaiah stood now, barefoot, arms crossed. "I guess I just didn't think your dream involved bleach and tile cleaner." That one landed harder than he knew. Abeni placed the mugs on the counter and looked at him. Really looked. "Dreams bend," she said quietly. "Sometimes they hold." He didn't reply. She didn't expect him to. Later, after he had gone back to the couch and pulled the blanket over his head, Abeni sat on her bed with a worn book open across her knees. Her fingers traced the Arabic lines, lips moving silently. "I come from there, and I have memories." Mahmoud Darwish, always Darwish when nothing else made sense. She closed the book, turned off the lamp, and laid down in the dark. Outside, the city exhaled. Inside, her silence sharpened. The lobby of Altiris Global pulsed with a quiet kind of panic. It wasn't loud. No one ran. No one screamed. But the energy had shifted. Tight smiles, rushed steps, and clipped conversations filled the air like static. Abeni stepped off the service elevator at 6:32 a.m. Earlier than usual. She had been reassigned to surface support on the executive level, a vague phrase that usually meant clean everything. Don't be seen. Her supervisor, Marty, hadn't given much detail. "Big deal upstairs today," he'd muttered over coffee and a clipboard. "Investors flying in. CEO wants the marble to shine like God himself is touring the place. You're on 44. And just like that, she'd been promoted temporarily from restroom rotation to boardroom territory. Abeni adjusted her gloves and pushed her cart into the corridor outside the main conference suite. The glass walls gleamed, lined with tall orchids and backlit logos. Inside, 3 executives clustered near the long table, one of them gesturing with his phone. Abeni moved quietly, wiping down door handles, pretending not to listen but catching everything. "Still stuck in Chicago," the man in a navy suit said, reading a text message. "No flights until tonight. The translator's not coming." Celeste Granger appeared seconds later, heels clicking like a metronome of stress. "What do you mean she's stuck?" Celeste snapped. "She was supposed to meet him at the car." "She called from the airport. Weather delay," the man replied. Celeste muttered something under her breath, then tapped furiously on her phone. Fine, fine, we'll adapt. One of the other executives looked uneasy. Rahim prefers to speak in Arabic during negotiations. That's what the prep packet said. He's fluent in English, sure, but he's formal. It's a respect thing. Celeste waved her hand. We'll use Google Translate, or that other one, VoiceBridge or whatever. Between that and my college Arabic, we'll manage. Abeni's hand stilled on the glass she was cleaning. Google Translate. Celeste kept going. He's a businessman, not a poet. We're not reciting Quran. We just need to hit the talking points and not offend anyone. The others didn't look convinced. Abeni quietly backed away from the doorway, moving to the corner where her cart waited. She opened the supply drawer, pretending to check inventory, her pulse steady but her thoughts not. She had read about Sheikh Rahim al-Qadr. She had studied his family's dialect variations in her second year at Edinburgh. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a cultural gatekeeper, a man who listened closely, not just for words, but for how you chose them. And Celeste planned to speak to him with a translation app. It was like handing someone a paper crown and calling them royalty. Abeni glanced at the time, 6:49 a.m. In 5 hours, the sheikh would walk through those doors. And no one in the building, no one that mattered seemed ready. By noon, the top floor of Altiris Global had transformed. The orchids had been replaced with rare white lilies. The coffee station now served imported espresso in glass cups that looked too fragile to touch, and the air perfumed with oud and tension felt heavier than ever. Abeni stood at the edge of the hallway, polishing the glass panel beside the conference room. She wasn't meant to be this close, but no one had told her to leave, so she stayed, invisible, listening. Inside the boardroom, a dozen executives took their seats. Celeste Granger sat near the head of the table, her hair pulled into a severe bun, voice light but clipped. The CEO, Mr. Roderick Hale, adjusted his tie every 30 seconds. Nervous habit. At 12:08 the elevator chimed. Sheikh Rahim al-Qadr entered. He wore no robe, no head covering, just a charcoal suit tailored so precisely it looked sculpted. But he didn't need traditional dress to carry presence. It moved with him. He greeted Mr. Hale in English flawless, but accented and offered brief nods to the others in the room. When his gaze swept toward the glass wall, his eyes lingered a half-second longer than expected. Abeni lowered her gaze, kept polishing. The meeting began. Introductions. Small talk. A slideshow about projected earnings. Then came the pivot the moment Rahim leaned back slightly in his chair, steepled his fingers, and spoke. Arabic. Not just conversational Arabic, not business school Arabic, but classical Arabic old, poetic, deliberate. The sentence flowed like water from a mountain spring, clean, sharp, purposeful. A beat of silence followed. Celeste, poised and overly confident, smiled and tapped on her phone. She held the screen toward the table. The app buzzed, then spoke in flat English. You seem concerned about the camel structuring. A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Celeste blinked. Camel, someone whispered. Another tried to stifle a laugh. Must be a bug. The CEO chuckled nervously. I'm sure he meant capital right. Celeste laughed, too brightly. Of course, just a misread. You know how these apps are. Rahim did not laugh. He didn't frown either, but something in his posture shifted a stillness that cut deeper than any gesture. He looked to one of his advisors and replied quietly in Arabic. Abeni, still polishing the glass, understood every word. They bring gold plates and silver words, but no understanding. Inside the boardroom, the translation app misfired again. You have good food, mind and wallet, together strong. The laughter that followed was thinner this time, embarrassed, defensive. Rahim remained calm, but his silence now spoke louder than anything else in the room. And outside the glass wall, Abeni's hand paused mid-polish. She had just witnessed the first fracture in the performance. And she knew it wouldn't be the last. The silence in the boardroom was thick enough to press against the glass. No one spoke, not Celeste, not the CEO, not the dozen executives shifting uncomfortably in their leather chairs. The app on the table blinked uselessly, still trying to translate something it was never built to understand. And just outside the conference room, mop in hand, gloves still on Abeni DuPont, took a breath. It wasn't a dramatic breath, not sharp or sudden, just steady, measured, like someone who had waited years to inhale fully. Then, in a voice calm but unwavering, she spoke. Ngai noi, joy thoi kong fai la chuyen nagu, ma la kam thong. Her Arabic was clear, her tone formal, respectful, elegant, the kind taught in quiet university libraries and debated over in translation theory courses, but it carried something deeper in tension. Inside the room, heads turned sharply, almost involuntarily. The janitor, the woman outside the glass, the one with the mop, had just spoken, like a diplomat. A full beat of stunned silence followed. Celeste blinked hard, her mouth slightly open as if caught mid-thought. She looked down at her phone as if it had betrayed her. Someone at the table whispered. What did she just say? Abeni didn't repeat herself. She didn't need to. Sheikh Rahim, still seated, slowly turned his head toward the glass wall. His gaze settled on her, not surprised, but attentive. And then, quietly, unmistakably, he smiled. Not a broad smile, just a subtle lift of the corner of his mouth, the kind reserved for rare moments, for rare people. Celeste found her voice first, or tried to. Well, she said, her laugh brittle. That was impressive. She must have memorized that from somewhere. A phrase book. Maybe. But Rahim had already stood. He addressed Abeni in Arabic, a longer sentence this time. Complex. Nuanced. The boardroom watched, paralyzed. Abeni didn't flinch. She answered softly, fluently in a dialect that marked her not just as a student of the language, but as someone who had lived inside its rhythm. She wasn't just translating, she was responding. Inside the room, the power dynamic tilted, not violently, but unmistakably. Roderick Hale, the CEO, cleared his throat. Miss Abeni, she said gently, still standing behind her cart. Celeste forced a smile. Well, Abeni, thank you. Very multicultural of our cleaning staff. Rahim didn't laugh. He addressed her again, this time in English so the room could hear. Miss Abeni DuPont, would you be willing to assist us further? I believe you are the most qualified voice here. And with that, a woman in janitor blues standing beside a mop bucket became the most important person in the room. No one moved at first. The question hung in the air like incense, fragrant, slow burning, impossible to ignore. Would you be willing to assist us further? I believe you are the most qualified voice here. Sheikh Rahim's words were clear, measured, intentional. And they had left the room, stunned. Abeni stood still by the glass wall. Her gloves were off now, tucked discreetly into the side pocket of her janitor uniform. The name tag on her chest read A. DuPont, slightly faded, clean, but unremarkable until now. All eyes turned to Roderick Hale, CEO of Altiris Global. He blinked, once, then again. It was the blink of a man recalculating status in real time. "Yes," he said, slowly. "Of course, if Miss DuPont is comfortable." Abeni looked toward Rahim, then back to the room. "I'm comfortable," she said evenly. "If you're certain." Rahim nodded once. "We are." Abeni didn't ask permission. She didn't fumble or apologize. She simply stepped forward, leaving her cleaning cart behind, and walked through the glass doors as if they had never been closed to her. No one offered her a chair, but Rahim did. He gestured to the empty seat directly beside him, the one that had been reserved for the now absent translator. Abeni sat down, calm, composed, still wearing her Altiris cleaning uniform, still smelling faintly of citrus and steel polish. But suddenly, the room felt different. Celeste forced another smile, the kind that stretched too wide and trembled at the edges. "Well then," she said, tapping her tablet. "Shall we continue?" Rahim said something in Arabic, longer this time, more layered. His tone was polite but testing. Abeni responded before the app could even blink. Her reply was fluent, smooth, her voice low but firm. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to communicate. And that made all the difference. The other executives exchanged looks, some confused, some impressed, one or two unsettled. The janitor was now speaking for the man they had tried so hard to impress, and not just translating his words but matching his cadence, tone, and intent. There was no more pretending, no more nodding blindly. Every sentence now passed through Abeni DuPont, every subtlety, every pause, every unspoken tension. And she handled them all gracefully. Roderick cleared his throat. "Miss DuPont, could you clarify what the sheikh meant by local equity perspective?" She answered, not looking at him, but at Rahim as if reminding them all who the question truly belonged to. Celeste tapped her pen against her tablet, once, twice, then stopped. Abeni never looked her way. For the first time since this meeting began, she didn't need to. The meeting flowed smoother now. Abeni sat poised beside Sheikh Rahim, answering questions, clarifying terms, catching subtle inflections in the Arabic that none of the executives could name, much less understand. But not everyone in the room was at ease. Celeste Granger watched her closely, tapping her pen against her tablet with exaggerated calm. The others listened to Abeni with growing respect. Celeste listened with growing calculation. It wasn't the words. It was the way the room kept tilting toward Abeni, the way Rahim nodded slightly each time she translated, the way the CEO no longer looked at Celeste when he had a doubt, but at Abeni. So when the conversation paused, a transition slide on the screen, Celeste struck. Her voice was light, too light. "So, Abeni," she began, drawing out the name as if testing it. "You seem surprisingly fluent. Where did you study Arabic?" A few heads turned, subtle, curious. Abeni didn't flinch. She met Celeste's gaze directly, calm, steady. "University of Edinburgh," she said simply. "Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "Really, undergraduate?" Abeni shook her head once. "Graduate. I earned my master's in Arabic linguistics and Islamic cultural history, first-class honors." Celeste's pen stilled. "And doctorate?" she asked, voice now edged with forced politeness. "I began a PhD," Abeni answered, focused on power dynamics in cross-cultural negotiation. "But I withdrew during my second year. My mother died unexpectedly. My brother was still a teenager. I came home. The room was quiet. Not awkward, not pitying, just still, as if the words had settled not just in ears, but in the floorboards. Even the HVAC hum seemed to pause. Celeste cleared her throat. That's quite the background. And now you're... Now, Abeni interrupted gently. I'm sitting in this boardroom, interpreting Arabic for a man who insists on precision. She looked directly at Celeste. Not with anger, not with challenge, just presence. And in that quiet gaze, the room shifted again. There was no applause, no gasp, just the undeniable sound of power reclaiming its name. Celeste looked down at her tablet. Rahim, still seated beside Abeni, turned to her and said something in Arabic. She translated it aloud. He says, "Dignity doesn't need titles, only truth." The CEO nodded slowly. No one had anything to add. Not yet. The meeting ended without applause. Not because it hadn't gone well, it had, remarkably so, but because no one quite knew how to transition from what they had just witnessed. The air in the room was different. No one rushed to pack their laptops. No one cracked jokes. Even Celeste, who usually stood first, remained seated an extra 10 seconds before rising as if unsure of her own footing. Abeni stood, quietly thanked the sheikh, then turned toward the door. No one stopped her. No one asked her to stay. But no one looked through her anymore, either. She walked out of the room the same way she had entered it, same uniform, same shoes, same cart parked in the hallway, but something invisible had shifted. People stepped aside for her now. They made eye contact. Some even nodded. It wasn't reverence, not yet, but it was recognition. And for someone who had lived so long in silence, that was enough. Later that evening, Abeni returned to the janitor's break room on the subfloor. The smell of industrial soap and microwaved noodles filled the air. Anna, a longtime cleaner with silver in her braids, raised an eyebrow when Abeni walked in. "Heard you spoke up there," Anna said, stirring her tea. "Whole damn building's whispering about it." Abeni offered a small smile, removed her gloves, and placed them gently on the table. "I didn't plan to—" "You never do," Anna replied, "but somehow, when you open your mouth, it feels like the floor stops creaking." They sat in quiet understanding for a few minutes. No fanfare, no celebration, just two women who'd scrubbed the same floors for years, one of them now seen a little differently. When Abeni got home, it was past 8 p.m. Isaiah was on the couch, headphones in, coding furiously. He looked up, eyes tired but alert. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Long day." "You look different," he said. "I was in the boardroom." Isaiah blinked. "Wait, what?" She didn't elaborate, just walked to her room. On her desk, propped against a stack of old notebooks, sat a small envelope, no return address, cream-colored, elegant. She opened it slowly. Inside was a folded card, handwritten in dark blue ink. "Miss DuPont, people don't just speak languages, they carry worlds. You, Miss DuPont, carry many." A qadr. Abeni stared at the words for a long moment. No flattery, no offer, just recognition. She placed the card gently inside her poetry book, the one she still read late at night, between loads of laundry and fading dreams. For the first time in years, someone had seen her not just for what she did, but for who she was, and maybe, just maybe, that changed everything. Monday morning, 9:17 a.m., an email pinged. The subject line blazed with clapping emojis on both sides. This week's honor. A shining example from our own team. Abeni glanced at it while stuffing her gloves into the small basement washer. She wasn't planning to read it. But then, a name in the first line caught her eye. This week, Altiras proudly recognizes the outstanding efforts of our night shift employee, Abeni DuPont, who contributed to making our investor meeting with Sheikh Rahim Al-Qadr a truly memorable event. No photo of her, just a tiny line underneath. Thank you for your flexibility and dedication. And below that was Celeste's photo, standing next to CEO Hale, shaking hands with Sheikh Rahim, framed against the gleaming Altiras logo wall. The caption read, Global Strategy Director Celeste Granger, who swiftly leveraged internal potential by identifying the linguistic asset within our logistics staff. Leverage, identified, as if she were some misplaced item found in storage. Abeni closed her eyes and exhaled slowly, not angry, not shocked, just tired. She knew this move. It wore the outfit of praise, but carried the bones of appropriation. No one asked her permission to use her name. No one invited her to speak, even though the email went company-wide. No mention of where she learned the language, what she understood, or how she stepped up. All the spotlight shone on Celeste. That afternoon, while Abeni was cleaning the front lobby, she overheard a segment on the mounted security TV. Celeste was on a local business network. Cream blazer, matching lipstick, posture perfectly angled. We always encourage talent at every level, Celeste said, her smile polished to corporate perfection. When I discovered Abeni had a language background, I knew it was a chance to create a meaningful moment for Altiras and our investor. Discovered. Abeni slowly set the mop down, not out of rage, but because she felt hollow. The news moved on to the weather. She picked the mop back up and turned away. No one lied, but no one told the truth either. That evening, in the elevator heading down to the basement, Anna asked gently, "You okay?" Abeni nodded. Just regular. I used to be invisible. Now I'm just mislit. Anna studied her. They don't know you yet. They've only seen you. They haven't understood. The elevator doors opened, and Abeni stepped out, just like every night, still quiet. But this time, her gaze wasn't on the floor. Wednesday, 10:03 a.m., a silent email appeared in Abeni's inbox. From Human Resources. Subject, Internal Meeting Request. Confidential. Please report to room 11B at 11:00 a.m. to discuss a matter concerning professional conduct. No explanation, no sender named, just one closing line. A representative from the strategy division will be present. Abeni sat still for a moment. Her stomach sank like still water in a cup. She hadn't done anything wrong, but she'd lived long enough to know. When a black woman is praised on a Monday, Wednesday might be the day she's asked to leave. 11:00 a.m., room 11B, 2 HR reps, a laptop, neutral expressions. Celeste was there too, back straight, hands folded neatly on her lap. No smile, but her lipstick was fresh. Thank you for coming. Abeni. One HR rep began. This meeting is to address concerns raised from recent internal content. Abeni nodded. I'm ready. The other opened a laptop, pressed play on an audio file. Her voice played, clipped from a private conversation. I know they'll never see my worth, but I don't need them to. That was it. No context, no leading question, no follow-up. Celeste tilted her head, her voice soft as frost on glass. We're a little concerned. Abeni, Given the sensitivity of your role, this kind of sentiment might be interpreted as oppositional to the company. Abeni looked at her. That was part of a private conversation. Sounds like it was cut off at both ends. Maybe, HR replied vaguely, but the content itself is troubling. Do you have a response? Abeni paused, then spoke calmly. I said they didn't see my worth because at the time, they truly didn't, but I never said I didn't need them. I said, I don't need them to know I have worth. Celeste laced her fingers. The issue is perception, not just literal words. No, Abeni replied, eyes steady. It's exactly about the words. The room fell silent, crisp as blank paper. Abeni stood. If there's an investigation, I'll cooperate fully. But if this is a way to sideline me from the Sheikh Rahim project, then I'm sorry, I won't stay silent. She gave a slight bow and walked out. The door closed behind her, and inside her, something flipped like a switch. Enough. Abeni didn't go home right after the HR meeting. Instead, she walked down the second-floor hallway where the technical rooms were tucked away, quiet, unnoticed. A short message had already been waiting on her phone. Meet me behind the IT office. No one knows. Shin. She knew Shin, not close, but enough to trust. A systems engineer, Vietnamese-American, quite a man who'd mastered the art of going unseen in spaces others overlook. Like her. Shin was already there, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, staring at a maintenance screen. No greeting, just a subtle glance, and then he held out his hand. In his palm, a smooth black USB stick. No label, no marks. Abeni looked at him. Didn't speak. Shin nodded and said quietly, It's from last week's operations room feed. Internal mic was still hot. No one else has access. I shouldn't have it, but after that Monday email, and after this morning's meeting, I think you should. She took the USB without a word. Shin continued, voice steady. Minute 8, informal strategy huddle. Mike stayed on by mistake, Celeste told the team. He paused, searching for the right words, then delivered them. Clearly. She thinks speaking Arabic makes her special. I'll remind her where the damn mop closet is. Silence. Abeni closed her eyes for a second, not from shock, not from rage, just to breathe deep enough. Shin looked at her, uneasy. I know. I should have sent this to HR, but we both know HR doesn't operate independently here. If you need me to, I'll stand by it. Abeni looked at him, then smiled. Not big, not fast, but enough to make Shin pause. No, she said gently. Thank you, but I'll hold on to it. Not yet. Shin frowned. You're not going to use it. Not now, she replied. I'll wait. Wait for what? She glanced toward the end of the hallway where the afternoon light was breaking through a frosted window. Her voice came low, even like the rhythm of her own familiar footsteps. I'll wait until they truly believe I won't do anything. And then Shin asked. Abeni looked forward. Her tone didn't rise, but something beneath it did. And then I'll do the one thing they can't undo. She slipped the USB into her pocket, walked away, slowly, leaving Shin behind as if he'd just witnessed something larger than any file or soundbite. A kind of power that hasn't even spoken yet. The invitation arrived on Friday morning. Not an email, not a text, but a thick envelope ivory paper, embossed with a golden emblem, delivered by hand, by none other than Sheikh Rahim's personal aide. Abeni opened it in silence, her fingers tracing each line of deep blue ink. The more she read, the stiller her gaze became. Miss DuPont, your clarity of language reflects a clarity of thought we value deeply. The Al-Qaeda Foundation would be honored to appoint you as Director of Cultural Strategy, based in Dubai. We will also support the completion of your doctoral studies in the field of your choosing. Full relocation assistance and family transition support included. With respect, Al-Qaeda. She read it 3 times, not out of disbelief, but because every word felt both real and unreal. The salary 10 times her current pay, the title executive level, and the doctoral program, the dream she once shelved like a scar that never healed. And then, one final line, soft as velvet and sharp as a blade. Based in Dubai. That evening, in their small Brooklyn apartment, the only sound was Isaiah's keyboard. He was working on a project, eyes focused, hair wild with caffeine and deadlines. Abeni sat by the window, still holding the letter. Streetlight caught the word Foundation stamped in gold on the envelope. She didn't know how to begin, didn't know if she should lead with the good news or the goodbye. Isaiah spoke first. You're quieter than usual. Abeni looked at him. Do you ever want to leave? What do you mean? She handed him the envelope. Isaiah read slowly, his brow tightening line by line. When he finished, he said just one word. Dubai. Abeni nodded. And I'm guessing I'm not part of that relocation assistance. Am I? I can ask for more time, try to negotiate. Isaiah said nothing for a long while. Then he turned to her, tired eyes soft, not angry. You've waited for so many years. Abeni, I won't be the reason you wait any longer. But I still need you, she said. No, he replied gently. I need to see you go. Abeni wanted to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. She'd been silent her whole life. Now, with the chance to speak in her own voice, she feared leaving would be the only way to use it. Monday, 9:00 a.m. Abeni was summoned to the 45th floor where CEO Roderick Hale's office sat behind 2 layers of glass and a row of receptionists with voices like ambient jazz. She had never entered this space as anything but someone who vacuumed the rugs. Today was different. Today, she was invited to sit. Coffee was already poured. There was no mop nearby. We're very impressed, Roderick began, his corporate smile so polished it almost felt sterile. The meeting with Sheikh Rahim spectacular. Abeni nodded slightly. No smile. I heard you wanted to speak, she said. Yes, he nodded. We think it's time to formalize your role. Someone with your influence shouldn't be left outside the system. He slid a folder across the desk. The bold title read, Internal Offer, Diversity, Ambassador and Cultural Engagement Advisor. Abeni flipped through the pages. The salary better, the benefits decent, the title impressive. But as she reached the responsibility section, her eyes slowed. Non-binding advisory role. Assist the communications team. Participate in select internal branding initiatives. No control over budgets, no authority to challenge policy, no power to hire, build a team, or lead any initiative independently. A golden cage, beautiful, but still a cage. Will I have a voice in strategic decisions, she asked. Roderick tilted his head, a smile unwavering. Of course, within the scope of your role, we deeply value diverse perspectives. Abeni fell silent. For a moment, she was reading a different document. Not the one in front of her, but the one hidden beneath the glossy words. They didn't want her to lead. They wanted her as a symbol, a face that nodded, not a voice that questioned. Roderick leaned in. We believe you could be the new face of Altiras. Inspiring, aspirational, Abeni looked at him. Her voice didn't rise. She just asked one question. Is this an offer? Or is it a way to keep me here so no one else can take me further? Something shifted in his face. Slightly, but enough for her to see it. She gently closed the folder. I'll need time to consider. Of course, he said, recovering his smile. But as she walked out of his office, Abeni knew. This wasn't an invitation. It was a warning dressed up in pleasantries. And she was no longer someone easily kept. The rain began at 7:42 p.m. Not harsh, not sudden, just soft, steady drops tapping the windows like thoughts at the edge of clarity. Abeni stood in the shadows of her living room. City lights diffused through the glass. In her hands, 2 letters, one from Sheikh Rahim, one from CEO Hale. Both were courteous, polished, written by men fluent in the language of power, but only one of them understood her. Behind her, Isaiah sat on the floor, laptop aglow, the only bright thing in the room. He'd just finished running a new code. One earbud in, eyes on her watching, silently, for a long time. You're going, aren't you? The question floated out, soft as rain against glass. Abeni didn't answer right away. She looked out where water traced slow lines down the pane like unnamed thoughts. Isaiah set his laptop aside and stood. You're standing between 2 things, he said. One that needs you, and one that only needs your image. Abeni turned toward him, her eyes steady. Isaiah stepped closer. Both offered you rooms, but only one gives you a key to your own door. She smiled, weary, but clear. You've gotten good at this, she said. I learned from someone who spent a lifetime in silence, he replied, gaze unwavering. They stood there, quiet but not heavy. Abeni laid the 2 letters on the table, then stepped to the window, forehead resting on the cool glass. She spoke slowly, but with conviction. This time, I'm not scrubbing floors, I'm designing the ceiling. Isaiah nodded, as if that answer had always been waiting, just needed her to say it. He turned to sit back down, but asked one more thing. Does it rain like this in Dubai? Abeni chuckled this time. Truly light? I doubt it, but if it does, the rain will know I didn't come to hide. I came to rebuild the roof. Outside, the rain kept falling. But inside, something had stopped drifting, and something else had just begun to move. The meeting room on the 48th floor didn't look the same that morning. Not because of the lighting, not because of the coffee, but because of who was standing in front of the room. Abeni DuPont in a simple dark blue suit, hair pulled back, eyes bright, stood before the LED screen, which displayed a world map lit with blinking points like heartbeats pulsing across continents. We can't conduct global communication through PowerPoint and data speak, she said, her voice steady and low, each word deliberate. We need a deeper version of listening, what I call cultural echo alignment. She clicked to the next slide. Up came interactive charts, region-specific multicultural engagement models, and real case studies of Altiris market failures rooted in poor language and cultural fluency. At the far end of the table, Rahim sat silently, but his gaze didn't leave her. This isn't just a communication strategy, Abeni continued. It's a trust architecture, one that doesn't require an interpreter, a way for language to become infrastructure, not a barrier. When the presentation ended, the room fell silent. Not with boredom, but with organized awe. Roderick nodded, about to speak, but Celeste stood up first. I must object, she said, holding a folder. This model, this idea, uses data and methodology drawn from internal Altiris assets. If I'm not mistaken, This strategy falls under corporate IP. She turned to Sheikh Rahim. And if you're considering investing in this initiative, I think we need a clear agreement on ownership. Rahim slowly turned toward her. His expression wasn't angry, it was disappointed. He spoke in English, clear, slow. I'm not investing in slides. I'm investing in someone who can reshape the structure of misunderstanding through language. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Rahim continued. What Miss DuPont presented today is not company property. It is the intellect she carried long before you knew her name. He looked to Roderick. This company once saw her as someone who mops floors. But truthfully, it's you all who have been mopping surfaces. She's been laying the foundation. No one said a word. Celeste sat down, shoulders stiff like stone in a storm. Abeni didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply nodded once, gathered her materials, and stepped back. The power play ended, not with shouting, but with a presentation and a perfectly timed gaze. The next morning, the office lights were still bright. The coffee machine still hummed, and Celeste Granger still sat at her desk back straight, belt-tightened blazer, eyes fixed on her screen like every other day. Only one thing was different. An email. No bold subject line, no exclamation marks, just 3 lines. From A. DuPont to C. Granger time 07:12 a.m. The recording I hold will remain private. If you exit quietly, no press, no noise, just the awareness of when it's time to stop. There was no threat, no demand, no attachment, but Celeste knew it existed. She didn't reply. That morning, Celeste still spoke at the meeting, still gave opinions on Q4 media strategy, still advised HR on internal morale metrics. But if you watched closely, her hands trembled when she flipped a page, and she never once made eye contact with Abeni. Abeni, on the other hand, remained calm as always. Few words, many notes. And when she looked at someone, she looked directly. That afternoon, nothing happened. The next day, nothing either. But by noon, on the second day, the CEO's assistant emerged from the office with an unfamiliar expression, one hand holding documents, the other a white envelope. Less than 10 minutes later, a system-wide notice appeared. Celeste Granger will step down as Global Strategy Director at the end of this month. We thank her for her contributions and dedication during her time at Altiris. No farewell meeting. No company-wide email. No mention of why. The office buzzed. Some said she found a better offer. Others whispered about tension with Sheikh Rahim. But Abeni remained at her desk, a cup of tea beside her, eyes scanning the strategic plan for next quarter. No smile, no comment, no name spoken. That afternoon, Shin, the IT engineer who once handed her the USB, passed by the lounge. He paused. This morning. What did you do? He asked. Abeni sipped her tea. Not much, she said, her voice light as if answering about the weather. Just gave someone the chance to leave through the front door instead of being dragged out the back. Shin nodded, then walked on. And Abeni, the woman who once stood behind glass doors, listening to words they never imagined she understood, had become the one they now had to read in silence. The week after, Abeni spoke little. She didn't engage in the whispers about Celeste's exit, didn't weigh in on HR's candidate shortlist, didn't react to the polite thank you for your service emails. Instead, she scheduled a one-on-one with Sheikh Rahim. No conference room, no slide deck. Just a quiet coffee meeting in a corner of the VIP office wing Rahim had temporarily rented. You once asked what I wanted after that first interpretation, she began. Rahim nodded, stirring his espresso slowly. I remember. Abeni took a deep breath. I have my answer now. She pulled out a 4-page proposal, no branding, no glossy budget forecasts, just an idea and a name. Fluent in Silence. A micro-grant program for support staff seeking to study language, translation, or cross-cultural communication. Rahim read in silence. When he looked up, his eyes held a smile not of lips, but of resolve. No retaliation, he said. No, Abeni replied. I don't want to build walls. I want to open doors. You know, he said thoughtfully, most people in your position would use a win like this to cement their seat. A seat never helped me translate a thing, she said firmly. But if I can help others speak before they're forced into silence that's worth keeping. Rahim nodded. I'll fund it, and I won't interfere with selections. Abeni smiled. And the name, he said quietly, fluent in silence. Yours. It's how I've lived, she answered, and how many others still live waiting for a moment to be heard. 1 month later, the company bulletin quietly displayed a new notice. New program, Fluent in Silence, a grant supporting service, logistics, security, and janitorial staff at Altiras to study language or interpretation. Each quarter, 5 will be selected. No degree required, just a personal letter and 1 question. What do you wish to say that the world has never stopped to hear? Anna, Abeni's old friend from basement shifts, was the first to apply. In her letter, she wrote, I don't need to say much, but I'd like to learn French, to finally understand the song my husband used to hum, the one I always smiled at and guessed blindly. And Abeni, reading that letter in silence, knew one thing clearly. She wasn't tearing anything down. She was building, 1 word at a time. Late afternoon, on the 7th floor of Altiras, there was a rare and pleasant quiet. The experimental classroom for the Fluent in Silence program had just been cleaned. The air still held the scent of new paper and printer ink, mixed with slanting sunlight through the window panes. Abeni entered without a sound. No laptop, no notebook, just an end-of-day walk, a habit she'd kept since things began to change. In the far corner of the room sat a young woman, wearing the same janitor uniform Abeni once wore stiff work pants. Light blue shirt. Her hair was braided neatly, her eyes fixed on the page in front of her. She was reading. Not skimming, not daydreaming, but truly reading as if each word was being lifted, examined, and tested with the heart. Abeni walked closer, making no noise. She quietly took a seat at the empty chair nearby, far enough to not intrude, close enough to be noticed. It took a moment before the girl looked up. Sorry, she said softly. I didn't think anyone was still here. It's okay, Abeni replied with a gentle smile. Are you reading French? The girl nodded, then held up the book, an old print of Le Petit Prince. Just trying, she said. I'm translating every line word for word. Abeni tilted her head slightly, eyes softening. What's your name? Tasha. Tasha Bell. I joined the program last week. Abeni nodded. You like languages? Tasha was quiet for a moment. Then she answered. Slowly. Deliberately. They're the only thing that makes me feel not small. Abeni didn't reply immediately. She just looked at Tasha. Really looked. Not because it was a beautiful answer, but because it was so familiar it hurt. She had been Tasha, sitting alone, reading foreign words, because the world around her was too familiar and too loud. I started with Arabic, Abeni said. Not because I needed it for work, but because I needed it to remind myself I had substance, even when people only saw the surface. Tasha stared at her for a beat, then whispered, "You're her. Right, the one who translated for the sheikh." Abeni smiled. "Also used to mop floors," she said. "Just like you." There was a short silence, but it was warm. Then Tasha spoke, her voice barely audible. "I don't think I'm good enough to do anything from here." Abeni tapped a rhythm gently on the table with one finger. "You don't have to do anything from here," she said. "Just be here. Read one more line. Say one more word. Every language starts with one simple thing, the desire to be understood." Tasha nodded, slowly but firmly, as if, in that moment, she had seen herself through the eyes of someone who had walked the path first. The main conference room at Altiris was more crowded than usual that day. From senior executives to logistics staff, from tech teams to front desk reception, everyone was there. No flowers, no background music, just a long round table, a large screen behind it, and soft lighting like a stage that didn't need spectacle. Abeni was the first to enter, dark gray suit, low bun, eyes calm like a lake before the wind. She didn't need an assistant to announce her, didn't wait to be invited to speak. She stepped to the center of the room, stood before the mic already in place, and looked around the circle of waiting eyes. Then, she began to speak in 3 different languages. The whole room exhaled. Not because they understood all 3, but because they had just heard a different architecture of presence. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. Communication, Abeni continued in English, slowly, is not about how many people hear you, it's about how many people know they're being heard. She stepped aside, making room at the center for the next speaker, Altiris' new CEO. Her name was Elaine Zhao, born in Shanghai, moved to San Francisco at 12, a woman fluent in 4 languages, Harvard-educated, and former head of an ed-tech organization in Asia. But today, she didn't introduce herself. She introduced Abeni. "Before we begin the main agenda," Elaine said, looking directly at her, "I want to start with something that's never been clearly stated in this room." She raised her hand, as if pointing to a truth that had always been there. She wasn't born to be heard. She was born to be listened to, and perhaps we've spent too long failing to realize that. Abeni didn't bow. She simply nodded. A small, quiet nod, the kind you give when a long-forgotten call finally gets an answer. Applause broke out, not choreographed, not directed, but real. And as the room settled, the meeting began. Not with charts, not with revenue projections, but with a single opening line on the screen written by Abeni. "All lasting systems begin by listening to those we once overlooked." All day, Abeni didn't stop. After the executive meeting, she had a session with the internal communications team to prepare for the new recruitment round of Fluent in Silence. A 3 p.m. call with Dubai partners was waiting. Then a quick logistics meeting about relocating the learning space to the ground floor, easier access for night shift staff. She hadn't touched her phone in hours. When she finally got home, kicked off her shoes, and sank into the familiar chair by the window, she turned on her screen. There, it was a message from Isaiah, sent at 2:17 p.m. No image, no link, just a short paragraph. "You taught me to speak. Now it's my turn to teach these kids not to stay silent anymore." Abeni paused. Read it again. Then again. She didn't reply right away, just sat there, phone in hand, a quiet warmth spreading inside her. 3 days ago, Isaiah had told her about an important meeting with a group of local investors. He was building a pilot program teaching basic coding to Black kids in underserved neighborhoods. One of the program's conditions, not just learning to write code, but learning to write questions. I want them to learn how to wonder out loud, Isaiah had told her, because some of them are brilliant, they just don't think they have the right to ask. At the time, Abeni had only nodded. She didn't say anything, but something in her had gently vibrated like a chord struck softly inside. She remembered the times she thought the same, that staying silent was the only way to not be seen, that if you weren't invited to speak, the best choice was to disappear. But Isaiah, he had learned how to flip that script. From inside their tiny apartment, from those nights she mopped floors while he typed lines of code under a flickering desk lamp. Now, he was using his voice to give other kids theirs. Abeni looked out the window. It was already dark. Streetlights spilled onto the sidewalk like dim lines of code glowing on midnight asphalt. She opened the message and typed back just 3 words. "Are you proud?" Isaiah responded almost instantly. "So much, but not of me. Of you for still doing what you promised. Not letting yourself stay quiet, and not letting anyone else stay quiet forever." Abeni set the phone down. Quietly, one hand reaching to gently stroke the edge of the worn poetry book that still sat on the side table. And in her heart, a thought took form. A voice doesn't always begin with sound. Sometimes, it begins with someone who dared to listen to you before the world was ready. The Global Languages for Impact Conference Hall was still like water before the first breeze. Nearly 400 people scholars, education activists, community interpreters, indigenous language teachers were watching the woman who had just stepped onto the stage. No dazzling lights, no sound effects, just a small mic, a single simple slide behind her, and one person standing. Abeni DuPont. She paused at the center of the stage, offering a slight nod to the front row where sat students from Senegal, a Haitian mother working as a community translator, and an elderly man from Okinawa who still preserved a language no textbooks remembered. Abeni scanned the hall, then spoke in Arabic. Not long, not theatrical, just a single sentence, gentle as advice held in one's chest for years. Then she raised her head and continued in English, slow and steady. "I said, don't wait for someone to understand your language. Teach them through your existence." A deep silence followed. She continued. "Too often, we confuse fluency with volume. We assume the loudest voices must have the most to say, but some of the most powerful languages begin in silence." She took a step forward. The light caught her shoulder gently. "I was once told I was just support staff, that my job was to clean, not to speak, but even then, I was fluent in more than one language, not just Arabic or English, but the language of waiting, of watching, of not being seen, yet never forgetting how to see." The hall remained quiet, but it was no longer empty silence. It was listening, true listening. Language is not only grammar or accent, it is memory, it is resistance, it is design, and sometimes it is survival. Some of us survive by carrying language like a lantern, not to find our way out, but to help someone else find their way in. The clip of her speech was uploaded across 3 platforms within 24 hours, 3 minutes, and 42 seconds. Each version came with subtitles in Spanish, French, Swahili, Hindi, and sign language. A separate version was reread in a synthetic voice for the visually impaired. The first comment came from a janitor in Brazil. "I don't speak Arabic. I don't even speak English well, but I understood her. I've lived what she said." A high school teacher in Detroit wrote, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the room." Abeni didn't reply to any comments, didn't share the clip, didn't agree to interviews. She didn't need to, because this time, her voice no longer needed an introduction. After the speech, Abeni was invited to stay on stage for a Q&A. No raised podium, No plush chairs, just a simple wooden seat, facing a long line of audience members with raised hands. The moderator selected a young student from the third row, a girl from Ethiopia. Frizzy hair, round glasses, gripping a notebook full of handwritten notes. She stood up, voice trembling slightly as she took the mic, but her eyes never left Abeni's. This question, she inhaled, then continued, is something I've carried into every room I've ever entered. The entire room quieted. If you've ever been the person in a room where no one listens to you, she said, voice steady but hoarse, then what made you start to speak? The question dropped like a stone into still water. No one interrupted, no coughs, no phones ringing. Abeni sat still, leaned back slightly in her chair, eyes searching the crowd as if scanning for a familiar face among strangers. Then she answered, not in a high pitch, not with emphasis, just truthfully. Because silence stopped protecting me. It started killing me. She paused. Nothing more needed saying. A beat of breathless quiet held. Then one person stood, then another, then an entire row. The applause wasn't loud like fireworks. It was low, solid, like a drumbeat passed from one heart to another. No one signaled it. There was no music, no MC on stage. Just a truth, small, deep, and undeniable, spoken in a voice so calm that everyone had to lean in. Abeni didn't bow. She didn't tear up. She simply sat there, letting the applause wash over her like rain after a long drought. Below, the student placed the mic down and clutched her notebook, holding it like she was holding on to something that had just become real. As the applause subsided, the moderator smiled gently into the mic. Thank you, Miss DuPont. That may have been the answer not just for today, but for many years past. The whole hall nodded. No one got up right away, as if they were afraid, if they moved too soon, the moment would vanish. Abeni stood. She didn't wave. She simply looked down at the audience, faces different, voices varied yet all connected by something shared. Not a language, but the right to exist through their own voice. Saturday afternoon, Altiris Global was quiet. No more meetings, no more elevator chimes, just sunlight falling slant across the long hallway, casting neat windowpane shadows across the polished floor. Abeni returned to the basement. No one called her there, no scheduled purpose, just a homecoming. The small door at the end of the hall, just beneath the maintenance supplies sign. She had opened it hundreds of times, wearing gloves, with sweat down her back, when each night ended with the sound of a mop wrung dry. The door still clicked gently. Inside was the same old room, cramped, a lingering smell of old disinfectant clinging to the walls, a crooked wooden shelf, a bare yellow bulb swinging slightly, and a mop, its wooden handle worn, the cloth strands bunched together like a tired fist. Abeni stood still for a moment. She didn't touch anything. She hadn't come to mop more floors. She had come to remind herself. Sometimes, the greatest thing we leave behind isn't a voice that echoed, but a silence we've outgrown. She pulled a small plaque from her coat pocket, steel engraved, matte, not shiny. She mounted it on the inside of the door, the exact spot where, years ago, she used to rest her forehead and exhale after each shift. The engraving read, "In this room, a woman once learned to speak. Now she teaches others how to be heard." Abeni stepped back, looked at the plaque. She didn't smile. She didn't take a photo. No documentation needed. A woman walked into her old room not to fetch water, but to return the weight of memory, exactly where it belonged. As she turned to leave, light from the hallway slipped through the doorframe, shining across the engraving like a bridge between two timelines. She didn't look back. And the mop, the witness to years of invisibility, still stood. Silent, still. But this time, it was no longer a symbol of silence. It was proof that even from the lowest floor of a building, a voice can rise that never needs to shout. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.